Bisnow, and I welcome you today to our Austin Architecture and Design event. This is the first time we've done this event in person in Austin. We started this series in DC, and historically the stars of our show or the content is around development. What we decided to do is we saw that there's a lot of plans and a lot of projects going on the way where architects had creative ideas, designs, and we weren't highlighting them as well. So we made this series and we made the architects the stars of the show, the design trends. We really want to get in the nitty-gritty of what's happening in the architecture and design community. And it's been a hit. We've now do these events in every single one of our major markets, and I'm excited to do this for the first time in Austin today. So, well, with that being said, it wouldn't be this couldn't have happened without our wonderful sponsors. So I want to give a huge shout out to our 8 sponsors for the event today: Core Office Interiors, PDR, Planning Design Research, Roadie Partners, Gensler, the Beck Group, HLB Design, Lighting Design, Sage Glass, Garza, and lastly, Perkins & Will. So a huge round of applause for our sponsors today. This could not have been without them. And then before I bring our keynote on stage, I want to introduce Tim Ford from Sage Glass to come up here real quick and give quick opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Like you said, I'm Tim Ford with Sage Glass. Who is Sage Glass? We are the industry leader in smart glass solutions. We're part of the Saint-Gobain family. Saint-Gobain is a 355-year-old company. That's not a mistake. I didn't add numbers to that. We are a 355-year-old company. So what that means to our customers, to architects, to developers, to owner groups, is that stability is built into everything that we do. That's what makes us the standard in the industry. When architects have customers who are looking to build something with the tenant in mind and with their employees in mind and with a more comfortable, energy-efficient building, Sage Glass is where they really turn to. Just kind of touching on some of the things that really drive design that Sage Glass should always be part of is when you're looking at LEED or you're looking at net zero or any of those methodologies, we add significant points to those types of methodologies in the built world. One of the things that we really focus in on is the earlier that we're part of the design conversations, the better it is. When we're sitting down with owner groups, with developers and architects before everyone else is involved, it just makes so much more sense for us to be there early. And anytime architects are looking at those type of methodologies, it's really important to have us involved. What is Sage Glass? So Sage Glass is smart glass. It's an automated solution that goes in commercial applications. We are in higher education, K through 12, healthcare, aviation, in the commercial built world. We have actually been in business for 30 years ourselves. So we really are the industry leader. And anytime that you have customers that are building from the people first type mentality, you should always look at Sage Glass. We're thankful to be here. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. All right, so I want to welcome our keynote speaker for today, Turan. He's going to come and have quick opening remarks as well. And then we're going to go into our first panel, which is designing buildings to stand the test of time, how to successfully future-proof projects, followed by our second panel of the day, designing with density in mind, the prominent trends shaping the Austin architecture and design. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Good morning. You know, when Sophie asked me to come speak this morning, I said, what would you want me to talk about? And she said, the work you've done in Austin. And I said, how much time do we have? She said, 15 minutes. I said, okay, I'll see if I can compress it down to 15 minutes. Really blessed because we've done actually 5 buildings in this town. And I'm going to show you not just the buildings, but the ideas behind the buildings and how we came up with them. Austin is an amazing place. In many ways, I think they're ahead of many other cities in America because they embraced, I think, what was written by Richard Florida 25 years ago when he wrote The Rise of the Creative Class. And he said that creatives are found in every field, and that creatives are ultimately going to be what drives growth in cities. And I think that's certainly the case for Austin. Anyone who studied architecture has read this book. It's called Collage City. And as much as we think we can anticipate what a city's going to look like in 20 years, 50 years, ultimately, unless you live in an authoritarian government, cities grow in increments. They grow over time. They grow based on what's happening in the economy at that time. And ultimately, cities like Austin, because they grow incrementally, it creates new conditions. Each time a new building is built, it adds a whole new condition to that site. And that is what makes it rich. That's what makes it experientially a rich place. You're very fortunate. You have a planning department that came up with the idea of great streets. And great streets really means great sidewalks. What is it that drives us, our decision making when we look at designing buildings? I came from an office working for Caesar Pelli. I was there for 17 years. And we always thought about how does a building meet the sky? How does it create an image, something that's memorable? How does it become an iconic element in the city? And what happens when a city has a dozen of these? Secondly, it's nothing more disappointing than seeing a great building off in the skyline. You get there and you're disappointed. How does that building meet the street? How does it meet the sidewalk? How does it engage people who come to the building at that intimate level? I think because I wanted to be an artist and my father said no, find something practical. I found an art form in architecture that allows me to exercise the art and bring it to the architecture. And art, materiality, and authenticity all go together. Everyone's now authentic. Authenticity is one of those overused words today, and no one knows what it means. And ultimately, I think only time will tell you if it's authentic or not. And then this last one, we've been preaching this probably for 30 years. Indoor, outdoor amenities, and now post-COVID, this is like the most popular thing to do. And every client is asking us, can we have terraces? Can we have open space? Can we have engagement with nature because it's healthy? So these are the projects that we've designed in downtown Austin. And really, when I was a young architect, I remember going to Chicago and seeing 6 buildings designed by SOM in one city, and I said, how the hell does that happen? And it happens over time, but I'm blessed. The very first building, and this is taken actually in 2004. I met Tim Hendricks with Cousins Properties. He brought me to the site, and he said, Congress Avenue is an important street. It's where the Capitol is located, and there hasn't been a great building in this city in 30 years. I want a signature tower that's going to anchor the center of the city. Well, it looks really different now. I want to debunk an urban myth right now. I'm sick and tired of people asking me, is it an owl? I did not go to Rice University. It was never intended to be an owl. In fact, the idea for the top of the building came from my daughter. I went home and I was working on the building. You can see some of the ideas we generated in the bottom right. Part of our exploratory process of finding the right answer. And my daughter was 9 years old and she was making these little origami flowers. I said, could you make a small one that fits into a big one? And she did that. I took it to the office the next day and I said, this is our top. Ultimately, the idea for the top is how do you take the curtain wall in a building, extend it beyond the top of the building, last occupied floor, and create a form, create a sculptural form with that. So this was the solution we had, and again, skyline, day and night. And what do we do down at the base? What do we do at the street? We were forced, really, because of a setback requirement, we were forced to push the building off Congress Avenue by 60 feet. And in a way, that was a good thing, because it allowed us to create a front porch. And we had a deep setback at the street level, and it created this space down at the bottom. And we said, how could we use that space? And we said, why don't we use it for engagement? Why don't we use it for parties? Why don't we use it for yoga? So already thinking about how do we engage people at street level? How do we make the lobby into art? How do we make the lobby? I remember my client said, I don't want to do a lobby and come back and hang some art on the walls. I said, well, we'll make it so you cannot hang any art on the walls. We'll make the lobby the art. Literally 10 years later, I get another call from Tim, and he said, I'm ready for a second building, and it's only 1 block away. This is the Colorado Tower. Very different dynamics. The city had changed. More people were living downtown. The city was actually growing west. So retail was happening, residential multifamily was happening. So very different set of circumstances. And this corner of Colorado and 3rd was the magic corner. Again, this is how we decided to engage the street, do these steep setbacks, bring forth this sense of materiality. We even brought these canopies lower to create a human scale of the street. My client told me that they often have people pressing their nose up against the glass to look at the art wall. A good friend of mine is a glass artist, and we came up with the idea of how do we create a waterfall without water. So we created this cast glass that has light behind it, and he even added bubbles so it would look like it was bubbling. And here's some of the other trends I'm sure people will talk about today, which is the whole idea of how the new workplace is changing everything. It's changing expectation of cutting second-story spaces, two-story spaces. I think we now have them on every project that we do. And then we had a little sliver of a leftover terrace on either side that you can see at the bottom right. And this is like I think this is like an indicator of things to come. So here's our 3rd building, which is the 405 Colorado. And this is a little unusual again. There are no 2 buildings that are the same. We had only an 18,000 square foot floor plate, and originally the site was designated for a garage, and garage only. And we said, our client said, could you put a building on top of the garage? We said, of course we could. And so we designed it in a way with a different kind of strategy. And here I look back at one of my favorite artists, Brancusi, and he believed that the sculpture and the pedestal are one composition. It's one idea, one piece of art. So we took the garage and we clad it in this terracotta finish, and we decided to use that as the podium for the sculptural piece on top. Unusual also in its footprint because the elevators for the garage are externalized. And you go up those elevators from a very small lobby on the ground floor to a sky lobby at the very top. That break that occurs between the garage and the office building. Small lobby. One of the things that I was struck by in the shape and form as we sculpted it is that it would refract different parts of the sky and clouds in different ways. And we said, what if we brought that into the design of the lobby? And we took these little half-inch Italian mosaics and created this mosaic wall of our sky lobby, our other sky lobby at the ground floor. Sky Terrace, and I think STG is here today, and they did a remarkable job on designing the sky lobby. It's a place where once you come up these elevators, you have this indoor-outdoor experience. You have all the amenities in the building. You have these fantastic views in all three directions. The core is pushed on the north side, so essentially you can see in this plan, the core is all pushed to the north, so you get three sides that are completely open and free. And then the fourth building we've designed, and this is, again, another completely different location and condition. This one is on Republic Square. And how many architects in the crowd? If you're really, really lucky, you get some really great sites, and the site will tell you everything. And here we said, we want an iconic building that sits on the square. It anchors the square, it faces the square. We even pushed the building back 60 feet to engage the square and expand the square. This building has, again, going to have a beautiful terrace on top of the parking structure, balconies all the way up the east side of the building. Again, this is designed before COVID, so we must have known something was coming. Street level, I think the vision is that with the park right across the way, the square, that we can expand and have events out here, farmers market. Great aspirations for this building. Again, that connection to transparency and connection indoor and outdoor, really important part of our effort with all of our buildings. Activity at the terrace level, activity at the corner, looking at the square. And again, I think, now that we're in this period where we're all trying to figure out how do we get workers to come back to work, and we're throwing all kinds of goodies at them. We're saying, we're going to give you a garden, we're going to give you play space, we're going to give you food, we're going to give you all this stuff. I mean, ultimately, I think we're trying to make it so that it feels like they're living a room and they can work in their pajamas. And, I think I'm looking forward to the panel discussion because this is the key that we're all trying to figure out. And again, roof terrace that's going to be full of activity space, probably the largest one that we've done. So it's amazing to me to see how fast this city has grown and has continued to grow. And I think there are a lot of things that are drawing people here. I think the creativity, technology, the arts, and I'm excited by maybe more so at what's happening at the street than I am what's happening in the sky. Because the street is where we experience things. And a friend of mine once said, you can always spot the architects in the crowd because they're the ones looking up. And everyone else is looking at the first 3 levels of the street, because that's where the life is that's going on. So I feel very, very blessed to have played a role in the city. And as I said, every year, every couple of years, the dynamics of what this place needs changes. So it's never just one thing. So thank you for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Sorry I went past my 15 minutes.
if we had another 15, I'm sure they'd love another 15. Thank you again. I want to go ahead and introduce our first panel to come up on stage. It is our Creating the Buildings to Stand the Test of Time.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Dan Betancourt. I am one of the principals of a local Central Texas boutique commercial construction company. Really excited to be part of this conversation today. I think over the last 18 months, we've kind of seen a lot of questions and uncertainty, and I think now we've got a little bit more certainty. We've got an amazing panel, so we'll just go start with Sandra, if you'll make some introductions, and then I'll kind of kick off our topic today, which is future-proofing design of our spaces and buildings.
Hi, I'm Sandra Perret, and I am the CEO of STG Design. Been with STG since May, and have just been delighted to get to work in a city like Austin, and adding to the streetscape and the skyscape has just been wonderful here. So thank you for what you've contributed to it. We're architecture and interior design. Previous to me joining STG, I was with AECOM and HOK. And my work revolves around corporate clients and the future of work. So this is a fantastic discussion to have with such great experience, and hope it's meaningful to you.
Hello, I'm Carrie Hawley, and I am CEO of HLB Lighting Design. We are an international lighting design firm with 7 offices across the nation, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Miami, Denver, and Austin. And we have been around for over 50 years. We work as a sub-consultant to help design the visual experience and create a sustainable, healthy, and fabulous environment. So I'm delighted to be here with all of the very wonderful folks on the panel today.
Good morning, my name is Casey Kent. I lead the workplace team for DLR Group here in Austin. DLR is an international design and architectural firm. We have fully integrated offerings from MEP to structural, AV, security, IT, experiential graphics, and really, excel at that complicated, complex project. We have over 500,000 square feet of tech office space and design here within the city, even though we're newer to town, and excited to offer our contribution to the conversation.
Hello, good morning. Netta Martin with Gensler. I am Director of Workplace and also co-leader of the Technology Practice Area. What that really means is that myself and another gentleman, we manage the Technology Practice Area globally for Gensler. And doesn't mean I do IT. So I've been doing this for, over 25 years, and spent about 19 of those in the DC metro area. And sort of grew up with the technology companies back to the dot-com era, when everybody thought it was really cool to have a bright green wall and the cafe and the shuffleboard. So it's amazing to watch, Austin really grow, and especially really take a stronghold with tech. But at Gensler, I think everybody knows who Gensler is, but we're broken into 4 sectors: work, lifestyle, community, and wellness. And wellness is the one that we added just last year, because everything that's been happening with the pandemic, and it was very important to develop that. So I'm sure we'll get into the wellness aspect, and thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Collins. I am a principal at PDR and lead up our design practice here in Austin on PDR's behalf. If those of you that aren't familiar with PDR, that stands for Planning, Design, and Research. We are a multidisciplinary solutions and strategy firm with an integrated practice around consulting, design, and brand. we have very deep roots in workplace design over 4 decades worth. So that really allows us to kind of bring a sense of holistic thinking and a human-centric approach to how we problem solve for our clients. So I myself have dedicated my career over 2 decades to workplace design. I actually started my career in Austin over 20 years ago and just recently relocated back here for PDR. So I'm so excited to be back in the city, and of course it's changed a lot. It's really great to see. So excited to be here and meet everybody. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy Kennedy. I work for the Beck Group. I'm an associate principal there, and we are an integrated design build firm in Austin, and we also have several locations nationwide. In addition to architecture and construction, we also have a technology company that develops software for the construction industry, and we have a prefabrication company that is working on the proliferation of prefabrication in the architecture workspace. I've been in Austin for 6 years, and prior to that in Denver, and really excited to be on this panel with everyone, and excited to talk to you today.
Great, thank you. So jumping into future-proofing our design, I think we want to start with the employee experience. I think, is everybody coming back to work? Is it, what's that going to look like? I think we have a lot more clarity on that today. So with Nena, I would like to kick off with you, with your real estate clients, when you're talking strategy with them, what types of things are you discussing and employing in your design?
Sure. So right now, on a global level, national level, and local, we're doing a lot of pilots because this idea of returning to work, it's not a one-size-fits-all, right, solution. It's really tailored and customized to what the client's needs are, what is their culture. And so, as soon as the pandemic happened, everybody went home to work from home and figured out it was a single direction solution, right? Everybody just needed to work from home. And so that was very easy. Everybody was operational very quickly. Productivity was super high. But now that we're starting to, slowly get back to the office, this return to work, I mean, you guys have seen the articles everywhere and the data and the information, and there is not a single solution. And so clients call us and say, they ask, what can we do? How do we do this? And, what we're doing is creating pilot programs to really understand their culture. What are their needs? What type of work modes do they have? And, looking at buildings, whether they're going into a brand new building, whether they're going into a second-gen building, or they're just redoing their space, what we're doing is doing the research to understand their culture and adapting to it. Now, if you're going into a brand new building or a second gen, we're looking at what type of elements and attributes does that base building have? Does it have access to natural light? What kind of deck-to-deck heights, are there for the building? And what kind of amenities? That's probably at the very top. And yes, people are asking, is there, MERV 13 filters in the building? And believe it or not, we see a huge growth in the addition of the infrastructure. But where the focus really needs to be is the amenity spaces and the flexibility, the adaptability that clients are looking for. So if you have a building that can, has a center core and then the perimeter areas can really be adaptable for all these different solutions, you're going to be better off. And we know that furniture is playing a big part of this entire process. What's interesting is that they're coming in and they're saying, we need to be ready in 3 months. Well, you guys know, GC guys, I mean, this is crazy. And so we have to sit there as designers and architects and come up with solutions on the fly and understand their culture and trying to merge all of this. And these are definitely unique times, and I think what is happening with workplace right now is pivotal to the future of how the office is going to function. Everybody has been working from home in their couch, their kitchen table, their bar stool. Maybe you created a new office, and that's wonderful. You can go to the refrigerator, grab a snack, go back. But now that we come back to the office, all those little accoutrements are gone. And so we need to think about the spaces that are adaptable, that promote collaboration, and at the end of the day, it's really about creating a space that's going to give the employees, the workforce, a sense of a reason to come into the office and a purpose. So,
Excellent. Would anybody like to expand on that at all?
I'm happy to do that. I agree with you. I think workplace of the future looks very different. I would say that hybrid working is here to stay. I think organizations need to embrace policies to really allow their employees the choice and the freedom to balance their days. And if they aren't able to do that, they're going to find it hard to compete for top talent. So, a lot of our clients are opting to adopt some sort of hybrid model. And the first question is, well, what kind of space and how much of it do we really need? What does this office now look like? And you're right. I think they need to take on this mindset of it's an experimentation as they come back to the office, and know that what they believe coming back is gonna change in 12, 18, or 24 months. So as designers and architects, to be able to design a very flexible space using modular planning strategies, streamlined kit of parts for furniture, so the space can easily, quickly adapt down the line at little cost or disruption to the organization. So those are strategies we're doing, and I think helping clients find a building that aligns with their strategy, so that there's no barriers, right? We're trying to take the friction out, take the barriers out of that freedom to morph the space as their needs change. So that's really big. And then I would have to also agree that the experience and making people feel like their well-being is of utmost importance is a big drive for people to come back to the office. So at PDR, we talk about this idea of human sustainability and how can we design spaces that really promote positive, both physical and emotional well-being for people in that space. So there's different concepts. At PDR, we talk about 3 characteristics that we look to design in spaces. One is connection to nature. People are really demanding having access to outdoor spaces, and if not, how can we help through biophilia to create that sense? Studies show it increases cognitive demand, and it makes you just feel calmer and more happy in the space. So whatever we can do, daylight and views, we're going to try to do that. Another idea is the sense of urban vibe, so human energy. I think we all can agree, being siloed in our home offices for 18 months, we really miss the human interaction. So coming together, having that connection to rebuild culture, rebuild creativity and innovation as a team, and reconnect back to the purpose of the company you work for. What are we all striving together to achieve? What goals are we trying to achieve as a team? So those are all things we talk to our clients about and try to capture in our projects.
Yeah, we're taking very similar approaches, but there's one difference that one of our clients brought up to us very early on in the pandemic. It's not really about return to work, because we're all still working. It's really return to office. And so the big question is why? Why would we go back to the office? What are we going to do when we're there? How do we compete with, we were talking about it, PJs, house slippers, those kind of things, and actually keep people as productive in an office environment. So I think those why questions really begin to define what you want to then do with physical space. So it's a really interesting dynamic. When we were talking a couple of days ago, this is all just a big test. We don't know. We don't know what's going to work. We don't know what the future is going to be. But as design professionals, it's always talking about that future. What could it be? How can we address it? And how can we bring that value to our clients?
Yeah, and so I'm hearing a few things. I'm hearing guidance, right? Where you say we don't necessarily know. I think especially with this group, and why I was really excited to have this conversation, is people sitting on this stage have a much better sense generally than a lot of our clients may, right? We've got global research, we've got international and local data, right, of things that we've employed over the last year and a half, and then prior to that. So I think when it comes to guidance, we do have a lot of that information. Creativity, Nena, was one of the things, right, from an employee experience. Well, looking forward with your space, creativity plays a huge role, right? How are we guiding them to utilize their space? And so if we can talk a little bit about that, go into some of the not just future-proofing mechanisms, but adding also some flexibility into that and the ability to shape their space over the years to come.
Sure, yeah, I can speak on that, and I completely agree with everything that's been said so far, and the why, I think, is huge. Everyone's why is different. So part of the exploration of the design team in working collaboratively with the client is determining the why, and really how to make the office environment a magnet, an attractor, not a requirement, not a mandate. So getting people to want to come in requires a lot of creative thinking and new techniques that we haven't used before, right? And a lot of that does come down to how do building owners and people that are providing leasing agreements and building new core and shell buildings, all of Tehran, you touched on fantastic design thinking here, but all of those things taking it to the next level about how are you going to future-proof your buildings. Some of those things, because we don't necessarily know, and you have to go through that why, is when you're talking about core and shell buildings, can you create infrastructures that are going to allow for more flexibility in the future? So some of the things we're looking at from a flexibility standpoint, first of all, just worrying about having to provide natural light environments and more resilient environments. Particularly, there was a huge storm that took down the power in Texas last year, So how do we create environments that can be managed better? Can we create higher sustainable environments using more natural light combined with electric light techniques? Can we create more digital LED environments that allow for future flexibility for all the reconfiguration that Amy was talking about? And I agree, spaces need to be much more flexible so that they can operate as touchdown spaces, hoteling environments where people can come in and work for even more flexible hours of the day. I think a lot of us, we were talking, Nana, the other night about people coming in at 10 o'clock and leaving at 3. They're not necessarily going to do the 9 to 5 grind. So how do you make spaces so that they can come in for team days, for collaboration days, and be productive for part of the day, have some quiet time, have some heads down time, but then also transform that quickly and easily into a more dynamic environment that offers that creativity and that collaboration, and maybe it's for training or for events. So rethinking how environments are built really from an infrastructure standpoint, and then allowing for that if it's demountable stuff, furniture, having digital controls, allowing for reconfiguration and having to get that technology, the AV, the acoustics, the lighting to all keep up with it. So it is a challenge. And thinking about how to make it all come together. We have a really aggressive energy code here now. So Austin and San Antonio are leading the way in Texas, which is awesome. But then how do you make a lot of demands work with very little? And so it's becoming a bigger and bigger puzzle every day. And we have to work really hard to come up with even better solutions. So make these spaces even better to get people back.
Thank you. Amy?
I think I was just, as you were saying, making spaces better, but I think we have this opportunity to make just the quality of our lives better. This is a huge opportunity to embrace. So I echo everything that you just said, Carrie.
No, I would just add to that as well. I think it's looking at different typologies too, and here in Austin we have this tremendous housing shortage, and how can we start to mesh up that live and work dynamic so that we have those more co-located? We're working with Hines to develop the first mass timber office and mixed-use residential product in East Austin currently. And we've seen a lot of interest in that to see from a single tenant user standpoint, how can you combine those and come in and have 100,000 square feet of office and 15 residential units together. So kind of creating that better than residential experience is one key aspect. Creating a dynamic, a wide spectrum of dynamic space that you can go into and use to escape your loud children at home, or to get that human connection if you're single and just have a small studio apartment. There's still a wide variety of need for why we come to the office, so we need to provide a solution to all of that. And I think the last point I would just add is that we're seeing more and more interest in kind of this metaverse. How do we connect the physical and digital together? And if you're going to have your team split across a wide physical area, how do we provide tools that make a catalyst out of that opportunity. So it's not a detriment, it is actually an opportunity that we can work from wherever, strike that personal balance, but at the same time be even more productive. Having our notes and our products that we're working on at work follow us wherever we are.
So I would like to talk, I mean, we've kind of segued into it already, but I would like to kind of get into some of the specific elements that we are designing into our spaces over the last 12 to 18 months that we've kind of learned. So Sandra, would you like to take us away?
Well, I think there's a whole new vocabulary, right, about the kinds of spaces that there are. And when we talk about collaboration spaces, there's actually 6 or 7 different kinds, right? There's not one solution for collaboration, because collaboration can also be us sitting at our individual desk, but leaning over and saying, what would you do about this? Kind of instance. So I think when we look at what goes into these spaces and you begin to look at collaboration, you have to define all the different kinds, and then you have to design for that. And that can be incredibly creative, the flexibility that we were talking about, because some of those can be such that they can be reconfigured at any time, to be used in different ways, depending on what team's in working that week. And so I think these collaboration spaces are going to be critically part of the future kit of parts that go into what these workspaces are.
I would add on to that too, we've seen a lot of shift in the dynamic of the ancillaries. I think the budgets here, as folks are recalibrating and seeing how they respond to this, the ancillary furnishings budget is going up tremendously. And what was maybe a 70 to 30% split on that private open office now is almost a 30 or 40% office to collaboration. And so it's going to be interesting to see where that calibration falls. And I think, as everyone's saying, that that individual culture of each organization really drives that. But it's definitely a trend that we're seeing.
I would say that also the focus of wellness is huge right now in the last 12 to 18 months. So a project that we've been working on is Springdale Green, and it's on Springdale and on the east side. And it's an 800,000 foot campus, about 30-acre site. And previously, it had been modified, and there was oil leakage from the prior resident. And so there was a lot of efforts that went into adapting that site. But what's really interesting in terms of the design that we've been doing, and it's with a developer from California, they have been the ones that really, were open to the ideas of what can we do with this building to really, the buildings, to take it to the next level, which is this wellness idea. And so it's no longer about, folks think that wellness, let's just get a mother's room, just a single room with a sink, and you're good to go. It's really beyond that, obviously. And so for this building, this campus, the design has been about creating a trail around the entire site. Elevated trails. We have a social hammock, which is, rope elevated in one of the areas where multiple people can gather and read a book. We've got a pavilion. We've got a basketball court. So, also a auditorium sort of area where they can have music. And so the idea is that if you go and work there, you've got the ability and the options to, go for a walk, go for a run. We're also designing 32,000 square foot terraces. It used to be that you would get, 300 square feet maybe, or maybe there's 1,000 square foot terrace. But it's really changing and evolving. And the idea of the spa, it's, I remember the days where spas used to go in the basements because nobody knew what to do with those spaces. Well, it's no longer about that. It's really putting the spa in the best location, because the focus is really wellness. It's about the employees. How do we create a space that's going to allow them to come in and feel at ease and be their best selves, right? It's really about that these days. And I think we can thank our Generation Z. We do a lot of research at Gensler, and one of the things we have been able to learn from that generation is that they really want to come into the office, which is great news for the brokers, developers, and for all of us, right? That keeps us working. But they want to collaborate, but they also want to learn. And they also realize that that is the way that you actually move up and, move up in the ladder, in terms of your position. So it's really thinking beyond of the wellness room and the break room. It's really thinking inside out and outside in of how to create a campus, a building that's going to have the test of time too. It's really future-proofing it. And I think also with technology, I know that's one of the things that we were talking about earlier, how to adapt it. And I know you guys are doing that with River South.
Yeah, I mean, a few things on, I think one of the interesting points you brought up is just over time how the idea from a development perspective of the amount of amenity that's provided has changed in really large scale projects and also more mid-market projects, and just seeing these load factors increase because it's really what the target market is wanting. They're wanting to have these amenities. And then also I think one of the interesting trends that we're seeing across our projects is the idea of making the amenity more equitable. So like where you might have a mid-terrace break or a sky terrace at the top, we're starting to see the amenities be spread more throughout the building because making more of these floors accessible to outside feeds into wellness, but it also from a development perspective adds value to that floor because you have that access to that amenity, and so you just you have more premier levels, I guess, in some ways. But also, I think after COVID, we all have the desire to be able to get outside. We have the desire to spend time outdoors, and being outdoors we know is healthy for us. And then kind of in regards to wellness, one thing that we're seeing, our sustainability team at Beck has also been starting to focus more and more on wellness. I think for a long time we've all been focused on sustainability, the LEED certifications, but we're starting to see more and more the proliferation of WELL certifications. So as designers and people who are constructing buildings, we of course have a responsibility to the environment to create something that is using energy appropriately, that's responding to the context. But we also have the responsibility to create a building that that helps people be healthy and helps their mental well-being. And so, and then from a marketability standpoint, in the same way that LEED creates some market advantage, I think some of these WELL certifications will start being some of the things that people look to when they're looking at buildings. Not just is this a LEED Platinum building, but is it a WELL certified building as well?
Can I add on to that? Thanks for bringing that up, Andy. I completely agree. We're seeing far more owners now interested in offering WELL certification, and many want LEED, a very high level of LEED, and WELL, which can compete at times. They might have competing metrics that we have to analyze, and so we really have to figure out what are the key aspects that need to be addressed, and then what are you willing to modify on the other side in order to come up with a healthy balance between sustainability and wellness. But definitely also fit well. We're seeing a lot more fit well interest. So it's interesting because now when you're thinking about it for building owners or developers, really coming up with a footprint and orienting the building, allowing for opportunities to get natural light in is really critical, because if you can't do that, there's a baseline requirement of WELL, which requires that you are providing appropriate circadian entrainment, which is giving people access to natural light, or to by giving them better interior lighting, which is competing against a lot of these LEED goals. So you have to really think about that from the very start. It's really important to do some analysis and some programming and thoughtful planning at the very beginning before you start signing on the dotted line. It's really critical.
I would add to that too, just we're seeing more and more of importance on indoor air quality. So it's, again, with the balconies, just that access to fresh air. DLR has the largest reset certified portfolio in the world across their offices, and have partnered with the Public School of Health at Harvard to really go through this multi-year study to see how indoor air quality really affects productivity. And there's a direct correlation to that. And so I think as more and more of that data comes out, and we get more of the fit wells, the WELL certification that really is centered around that user experience, that is going to be first and foremost in a lot of organizations. We're seeing quite a few large landlords look at this and see how they can deliver that dashboarding back to their tenants to see and confirm that indoor air quality. But there's a lot more of that to come, and I think a lot more publicity around it as we realize that the indoor air quality of our homes isn't nearly as good as we think it is. And if we are spending this amount of time in our offices, that becomes very, very important.
So a key stakeholder to engage, obviously, in this conversation is HR. We can typically design anything you want to design, and we've got some great creative ideas. But if you haven't engaged HR early on, then being able to get the policies in place that allow these spaces to be used, that have the endorsement and the engagement on an HR level, then you're not going to be successful with the space. And somebody's going to walk around one day and go, we just did 32,000 square feet in a sports center, and that doesn't even go with our policy. So I think, again, back to the questions, why? Why would we do these things? Well, it's in our HR policy that we're going to support the most healthy environment for our employees. So early engagement and asking those why questions about that then lets what we do design be truly important to that company and sustainable. Not that kind of sustainable in going forward with their programs with their employees. It's great PR from a recruiting, a retention, and an onboarding, right? So you're trying to get the best talent. There's a talent war here in Austin, we all know that. To be able to take somebody around and say, this is what our firm truly believes, and we're going to support you in your journey to wellness. And by the way, here's all the physical spaces that can make that happen. So it really, if you haven't engaged the HR side of it, then you're missing a stakeholder that could be your biggest promoter of what you're trying to do from a design standpoint.
And just to add to that, two things. What we see in the research is that the way to select a space, it used to be, whether it was legal or your facilities folks. Well, it's really now a grouping of the process, including HR, including legal, including operations. I mean, we see now that operations, companies are having to hire more because of, trying to address, who's coming in today and how do we deal with all of this. And it's a constant change, and your typical operational or facilities person can't handle it. They need more people. The other thing is that's like probably the biggest aspect to this entire discussion is that it's the end users that are asking for this, and in particular we see it with tech companies, the big tech. They're wanting to improve their ESGs. And so the ESGs is where it's at. They want to be the ones at the front and center leading the change. And because of climate change and everything that we're now seeing it, and it's here and here to stay, they're saying, you know what, we can't do spaces like this. We really need to think about the future and how we're gonna address, sustainability, how we're gonna design spaces not only for wellness, but also that are gonna be adaptable, and the materials, the resources that we're using, we can't forever have, certain resources, so we have to think about that. And so we see this big push, and now it's starting, it starts with the big tech, and it starts to trickle down to the medium and smaller. And I think developers, when they start to hear that from them, they're thinking, well, we need to design buildings that are gonna be, for the future.
Yeah.
And technology is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think I like to add to that. So at Beck, we're designing building River South, and it's incorporating a lot of new technology. And I think to your point, the end user is looking for a building that's flexible and meets their technological needs. And that really has to do with creating the right backbone system for that when you're designing the core and shell space. And so this project that we're working on, we've studied and implemented a lot of different smart technology, and it kind of all starts with that fiber backbone that has the flexibility over time to connect to the technologies as they change. Because as we know, these buildings are going to be here for a long time, and we know that the technology is also rapid. But some of the things that we've implemented have to do with indoor air quality that we talked about before. They also have to do with micro vibration sensors as occupancy rather than a traditional sensor. And that's really interesting because it allows you to collect data. So is my boardroom being used like it's, how is it really being used? And then over time, being able to use that data to inform your interior space design, and also being able to use it to sort of inform how the building is being used over time. And then from a kind of convenience perspective or marketability perspective, the idea of a digital concierge, so the experience really being digital, you being able to drive into the building, the parking being smart enough to tell you where your space is, you have your coffee ordered, it's waiting for you when you get in the building, and then down to integrating sort of the master system with the spaces, you know, someone being able to use that same app to reserve their conference room, and when they get there, you know, all of the settings for the media are sort of in the way that they want them. And so seeing some of that technology, and then and also some of the sort of physical aspects, like we talked about the sort of a smart glazing systems. And I think too, like Austin has some work for the energy code to really catch up with how those systems work, so that we can actually leverage them in the right way. The city doesn't exactly know how to view those systems yet, and I'm excited to see how the city sort of catches up with some of the technology that's already in place. So,
Just to add on to technology, if we can jump to technology, okay. Because Sandra mentioned stakeholders, and you started talking about building backbones, and it reminded me of, we often really advise our clients to bring in, you know, HR, real estate, and IT from operations is key. So I think we can all agree a hybrid way of working is very different compared to a team that is 100% on-site or 100% remote. So when clients are really not gravitating towards hybrid working, they have to reassess their major workflows. And one of the things you mentioned, data, at PDR, we're very big on, you know, when you can make data-driven decisions whenever possible, that's really key to kind of ensuring, you know, success and whatever the solutions end up being. So we see this opportunity with our clients early on to say, okay, let's do a current state assessment. You have the ability to tap into current communications data to study how your people currently are feeling. What is their current user sentiment? What's their current user behaviors? What is the current business performance with what you're doing right now? What's working, what's not working? And then once you have that data, you're armed with that data, you can assess these workflows and really dig down into what's the optimal process now, what's the optimal behaviors now, so that we can create the right tools with the right technologies to give to the employees to make sure that this hybrid model is going to be successful for them. So I think aligning with a building that has a backbone that's going to support that is critical. So having IT up front in the discussions is really just as important as HR, I would say.
I want to add also real quick on technology that one of the big things that we hear, though, all the time is that it's really important to have this wonderful, adaptive, future-proofed technology in the backbone, but we also have to align with people's ability to manage it and have it be user-friendly, and so that's like critical, is finding that sweet spot between the sophistication of it and then people actually being able to use it, because one of the most annoying things to people is to come in and if they can't do anything in the room. So moving into artificial intelligence or phone control, or Andy, you were mentioning having it remember your settings, like set it once and get some basic training, because you're never going to remember in 3 months or something if you go back in there and have to modify it. So coming up with future-proofing thinking about how to allow for customization. It's going to, again, go back to that fundamental aspect we've been talking about at the beginning, which is make it better than a home office, make it better than what they have access to. So what are you going to do in order to get people in there? So you have to think about all those pain points and break them down.
Forget the room. I say that about my computer all the time. Just help me here.
Yeah, we do talk about that whatever the solution, the right solution ends up being, it needs to be, we call it location agnostic. So no matter where you're working from, when you sit down at your computer and you plug in and you get into the network or you join a meeting, it's the same experience with the same familiar tools, no matter where you're sitting. And I think we probably all have struggled with that in this kind of this work from home situation we're in, but I think that's something that the IT operations departments needs to really hone in on, because it's frustrating, and then people aren't as productive as they can be on a day-to-day basis.
So before I moved to Austin years ago, one of the projects I worked on was we did about 250,000 feet for Symantec, and we employed a lot of those well-building principles, and it was very early on. I think there was one other building in the U.S. that had done it at that point. And so you were kind of pioneering that, and it does compete with LEED a little bit, but you were also trying to research a lot of that. It's easier, I think, with some of those large corporations because they've got the real estate team to have that conversation. One of the things that I love about Austin is you have those small and those mid-sized companies that really need that same guidance. So I would like to talk a little bit about how we're kind of helping that client through that, right? If you have a 20, 30, 40,000 square foot tenant, you're dealing typically with an operations person, right? They may not have a dedicated real estate person. And so it is really important to fold in the HR team into that conversation because there's a lot of ROI and a lot of these things that we're putting into these spaces, but a lot of it really comes down to educating them on exactly what it is, how to use it, what systems they've got, what technology is in the building, and what you're doing for that individual employee or that team lead, because that team lead needs to be able to educate, right? Change management for these large tech companies is a prominent term. A lot of these companies here may not understand change management, so we almost need to bring that to them. So can we speak to that a little bit?
I was pointing to my change management guys back there. That's exactly why we're doing that kind of thing. I think the term trusted advisor applies more to us than ever before, right? Especially relative to mid-market kind of companies, because they're expecting whoever comes in. We kind of discussed this before. Whereas before they may have gone to somebody that just did the work every day in a typical way. Now they're looking for the trusted advisors who are testing this with larger clients, who are trying to understand what the trends are. And we're the ones, I think, that are going to have even more success with mid-market because we can say, let us talk to you about what everybody else is doing and then find that sweet spot just for you. So, you know, those phrases, being a trusted advisor, bringing what market trends are going to be even more important as we go forward.
And just to add to that, we do a lot of research, and so what we see in different areas and different zones of the world, we can bring that information, but I think it's also very important to be transparent, right? Just because Google or Apple did X, Y, and Z doesn't mean that, you know, the smaller startup or middle tier can actually afford to do that. So it's really about creating sort of a list of solutions for them that they can actually attain. Otherwise, you know, they're thinking, well, we want to look like this and we want to have this tool. Well, that tool costs this much, you know. So it's really a trusted advisor and then also being very transparent.
Andy, I think you're in an interesting position in your role kind of within Beck. Can you speak to how y'all have done some of that ROI analysis specifically for a lot of the systems that you're implementing?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give specifics on sort of return values just because, but I mean, with all these things, obviously a return on investment is a huge factor in the things that we're looking at. And a lot of that has to do with getting people into our spaces. And so I think some of the smart building technology is starting to become a differentiator where things like LEED, I think, are an expectation. So that's part of, I think it's great for us as designers because some of the things that are becoming market expectations are also for the betterment of our communities and our buildings in general. So ideas like being implemented are also just another great investment. But we are seeing that things like smart building technology are producing, you know, higher sort of lease rate returns. So
I would just add to that too that I think no matter if it's 20,000 square feet or if it's 400,000 square feet, a lot of these office environments now are in this hybrid scenario. So you're going to have more of a hoteling scenario. We have a higher population of our employees coming in to utilize the single office than we were able to before. And so I think that provides more resiliency for businesses of no matter what the scale is. And it also shifts the needle on what those costs per employee or per square foot are. We're helping a client fit out 5 floors in East Austin, and you know, at any one time there's probably 700 folks that can be in that space, but there's over 5,000 that will call that home. And so those teams and departments will come in for a day or a few weeks at a time and kind of workshop together and then go back out to the remote setting. And so that enables them to invest a different amount, a departure from what they would have before to make sure that this is the very best environment. And the ROI still makes a lot of sense.
We talk a lot about designing spaces that are more fit for purpose now, and there's less emphasis on one seat for one individual. That takes up a lot of space and a lot of cost. And so thinking about the office now, what is the role it really is playing for your organization, and be very strategic on the design of that, so it's meeting the purpose of what is the role it's playing right now.
So looking forward, kind of utilizing the last 18 months, I mean, does anybody have any specific design pieces that you're putting into spaces as we're going forward?
I would say, so technology, it's big, right? The biggest questions that we're getting right now from clients all over, not just local, is what's the best app I can use for my return to the office? And there is 8,000 apps globally right now, and no one really has the final answer of which one's the best one to utilize, so it's a lot of trial and error. We have a client that just started using an app, and they're calling it Office Space, which I thought was just perfect and appropriate. But, you know, and so technology is big. You know, it's about that interaction, it's that digital concierge where you come in and your phone, you know, tells you what's happening in the building, you know, where you can park, and, you know, where, you know, is Susie in the building today? You can check and see where they're sitting, and so you can go and collaborate with them. So it's really about becoming one with technology. That is the future. That's here to stay. And the wellness aspect, I mean, I would say those are the two biggest emphasis or focus for the future.
Well, and I think we all know perception's reality, right? So end users are faced with, what are people seeing me do that's going to have some value? So I think one of the big opportunities is touchless technology. And so that has the whole technology piece in it, but what can I go into and never touch? You know, can I get into the office without touching anything, including going up in the elevator, obviously restroom facilities? But again, the settings in the conference room, it sees me walking in, it's biometric, it knows it's me, and it's going to do that. So I think what this COVID-19 pandemic, you know, we like to say it didn't cause all of this to happen, but it's a catalyst for it to advance, right? It's a catalyst for evolution. And so I think product development going forward is going to be huge. We're going to try to create so many new products that don't exist now that nobody ever has to touch, because that is something that end users can see, and that perception is my boss cares about me and is going to make sure that I stay safe. So those things I think are going to be important.
Yeah, I think one of the fastest growing departments within DLR is our scripting team, that's essentially able to take, you know, whatever system or controls, be agnostic, script them back together to dashboards that can correlate to KPIs. So no matter the organization's size, we're able to actually inform and listen. So we've said we don't know what is going to happen here over the next few months, few years. How can we be sure that we're listening? We're using that active daily research to see how our culture is forming the environment that we need, and there's no better way to do that than just to dashboard it and see it in real time.
Can you elaborate a little bit on how you're implementing that? How does that conversation start?
Yeah, so I think there's different scales to it. There's large, multinational landlords that we're tapping into base building systems to just dashboard back air quality or occupancy use, the cleaning schedules, that type of thing. But then there's groups who've done an extensive partnership with LinkedIn here over the past year to really touch every single employee across the world, listen to each one of their teams, understand really what does the future of work look like for them. You've got 16,000 employees across the entire world. You've got offices small and large. How does that scale meet every single office and every single individual culture across those countries? So really they have, they're a tech firm, they're very acute in the number of items that they are tracking on a daily basis and how we can correlate that back to some dashboarding. So it's a really far spectrum case scenario, but we've taken a lot of those lessons learned from small to mid-sized companies as well, that they have these key metrics that they are already tracking, that they have seen direct their bottom line for their business. How can we marry those up with built environment metrics as well and see what actually affects where is their money best used, and build in a modular way so that can adapt over time. and they don't need to come back for a full construction renovation 24 months from now, but we can still take that data and apply it to whatever that new need is.
I want to add on to that because I completely agree, and I think we see trending more and more companies interested in doing something with the data, but it's aligning with the purpose-driven cultures of the people. And so more and more employees are more interested in creating a better environment, reducing waste, having health and healthful initiatives, things like that. And so data tracking and making that transparent to the greater employee base is really valuable. Even we have some clients who've wanted like technology to reveal data on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They're tracking it, they're competing floor by floor. I mean, there's all kinds of initiatives that can happen. So I think it's really interesting how that is another way that, you know, it kind of aligns the purpose with also the future proofing and the ability for them to track and then design better spaces, particularly with national accounts.
Has anyone here had a specific client come back to you that you may have finished their space like 2 or 3 years ago to come, you know, update it for what we're experiencing now and speak to some of those specifics?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten probably as early as this year calls of, you know, come check out the space, you guys designed it, what can we do now for this new way of working? We have one particular client that did a lot of training, and they were hiring about 100 people a month. So they were growing just leaps and bounds, and they realized that they no longer needed the training rooms to train these people because the new employees could just train from home. And so what do we do with these spaces? You know, and we want them, by the way, we want them to come in too. So we started to look at those training rooms and the big conference rooms that they had, and really started to adapt it to different types of meeting spaces and the hybrid meeting areas and creating larger amenity spaces. We have another client that decided to take one of their buildings and turn it into a completely amenity-based building, focusing purely for meeting spaces, for collaboration, and you know, took away all the workstations. So it's kind of drastic, but they could see the writing on the wall, and for their own culture and how it works well. I don't think it's the solution for everybody, but you know, that was one of the things we continue to see.
And I think when you talk about those mid-market clients, you know, I think we've tried to be creative in how we spend their capital money, capital expenditures. So it's not necessarily physical construction. Sometimes it's just the furniture solution. And we work with our furniture partners to come in and say, okay, can we take out individual workstations and create more collaboration spaces? So it's about repurposing the space, but it's also about the capital improvement dollars. Because if you spend it now, then it's not going to be there to spend when maybe there's an opportunity for a bigger project.
We've been tasked with a handful of those projects where we'll get a floor plan and say, hey, can you just throw some dollars at this and help us understand? And it primarily is furniture reconfiguration, and then kind of a lot of the smaller meeting room spaces, seeing if there's a way to repurpose those. Single occupant restrooms as well have been pretty big, just to kind of give employees a sense that they can have their own space. Sorry, I thought my audio. And then also access to centralized amenities as well, kind of Nana, to your point, so they don't have to congregate in one specific area on a floor plate, breaking those out. Is there anything from the past 18 months when we look back pre-COVID that is not working? Does anything stand out that we've changed kind of from a design perspective?
The 6 foot apart. I mean, that was kind of a joke, the plexiglass. I mean, you know, really, it's funny because it's everywhere, right? I was at the symphony the other day, and you know, they want you to stand 6 feet apart to go to the bathroom, but in the stalls, not all of them were open. But then we sat right next to each other, probably not even 6 inches apart. So that mentality, you know, it's something that's not going to be here. It's going to have, I think we have to think of different solutions. And technology being your friend and telling you if you're not feeling well that day, you're not coming in. You know, you can't get into the office. So I think it's the approach. Also, sickness. If you have a cold, whether it's COVID or not, I mean, you're not coming in. And I think people and leaders, directors of offices have actually realized that, yeah, I'd rather you not come in today, where it used to be the norm, you have somebody sniffing, sneezing all over you, when you were in a meeting. So that mindset has really changed.
I would agree. We had a lot of clients at the beginning that thought, we'll spend some money on plexiglass dividers and the people will come back, And it was expensive. I mean, it wasn't a cheap thing to do. And it backfired on them because people came back and, I don't know, it just kind of generated more fear because you felt like it's not safe yet. So I think moving forward, we need to design spaces that are safer, but just have it be inherently in the design and not have it be noticeable where it's going to spark that fear or making people feel uncomfortable to come back in public with one another.
I think, too, one thing that sort of came out of this was just I think some people already had this, but I think more and more it's becoming like a necessity, is really just having a space to present digitally that has all the aspects that you need to really succeed. So the green screen, all the tech that's built in, so that when you're presenting digitally, you have the ability to really wow the client or communicate well. And I feel like we're designing more spaces that have, and even in our own space, creating just fantastic spaces for digital presentation and digital meeting.
And equity, right?
Yeah.
So that when you're working with your colleagues, if you're home and others are in the office, how do you create an experience that is equitable to everybody? That's really important.
Perfect. I have a couple questions from the audience. It says, currently most office developments devote equal space or equal square footage to car storage parking as office space. How are you designing this component to address the future of transport and car ownership?
I have a kind of a specific example. So on several of our projects, we're looking at the idea of structural flexibility. So as parking is required less and as the advent of self-driving cars, or in the advent of that, reducing the load on parking, how do we make parking structures flexible so that they can be converted into other types of space? And we even, on River South, we even have one floor that was initially a parking floor that we converted into office just based on the demand for the space itself. But how do we think about the parking system as something in the future that might not be as necessary? And do we design the skin of the building and the systems so that you can adapt over time to the ability to use those spaces for other things than parking? So
I want to add to that. We're also seeing a lot more on projects. They're popping up more and more, the autonomous parking systems, so that they can really densely park cars in, so they reduce the footprint for the parking. But people aren't actually parking their own cars as much. So I know that's being introduced in some of the major downtown areas, so that more and more building owners are investing in that technology, so that you'll just drop your car off almost at like a valet point, but then there's this autonomous element that takes your car up and then pulls it out when you request it. So you order your car and you get it back.
Interesting. Since it's always brought up, would it be helpful to just allow/encourage pajamas in the office?
Pajama
No,
face.
why not? I mean, tech has always adopted a very, if you show up like I'm dressed right now to a tech meeting, they look at you like you got 3 heads. So, I think it really depends on the company. I really think it depends on the leadership and what the culture ultimately of those employees. If you're going to produce, you're going to be a Steve Jobs type of mentality. Who cares what you're wearing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think through the generations, we've been able to adapt more and more, but the Gen Zers don't want to dress up. They want to be comfortable. So I don't know, we've got to maybe create a new line of pajama wear that's still cool and acceptable for the office.
I think for women,
That happens, then I'll change it to yes. But until that happens, it's a hard no.
I think for women, I don't know, for women, like to get ready in the morning and kind of put on, the office and then commute, it takes time out of your day. And so I think there should be, I think that we'll see a gradual shift towards more casual in the workplace. I think it obviously depends on the culture of your organization and maybe what city you're in. There's more conservative cities than others, but I think it's going to happen.
It's been changing, even the legal practice. You know, we see them changing. It used to be full suit and tie, and they're no longer wearing the jacket and the tie. So it's evolving. And even, you know, I come from the DC metro area. Ooh, the khakis and the light blue shirts and the ties, that is slowly dissipating, which is great. You know, never good fashion. So.
One more question. It says, the building and spaces you design today will likely be standing and functioning long past 2050. Are you looking for ways to curtail the carbon footprint of your projects, both in the materials used and the operating efficiency once in use?
Absolutely. We mentioned the heavy timber. It's been a strong product of ours for the last 10 plus years here, and really has started to gain more exposure across the board. But just the immense carbon sequestration that product can provide is great. And I think seeing more and more wood used smartly through the building process will be great from that aspect. But absolutely, seeing how we can move away from concrete and steel or better those materials so that they have a better wellness, better overall sustainability story to them, but also just building more resilient structures. So can we repurpose a parking deck for occupancy, or can we move an office building to a hotel, to a multifamily? Let's build for that resiliency rather than just building that 30-year structure.
I completely agree with both those. Mass timber is just like going crazy right now. It's an amazing technology. I also wanted to add on that we are now seeing more and more and more emphasis on net zero projects. So that really, and now we're seeing RFPs net positive. So they'll say net zero or net positive. Wow, right? Like, can you believe that? That's going to be here in 10 years. So the idea of just reaching and really thinking about that, it's really predominant. And particularly in public sector work, I think they're leading the way because a lot of government-funded projects are requiring net zero now. So it's really interesting how I think that's going to be influencing more of corporate America and multifamily and other project types as they continue. So that's a huge trend to reduce energy.
Also in California, we're seeing a lot of companies starting up to help with furniture being repurposed, and that's huge right now in terms of companies that maybe no longer need 400 workstations. They're storing them and putting it out there so that another company can reuse that. And so we see that as a huge part of furniture solutions. And then in terms of materials, how many times have we seen a 5-year lease, a 3-year lease, brand new materials? Somebody else comes in, it gets taken to the landfill. So we can't be doing those types of leases anymore, those types of spaces. We have to think, what are the materials that are going to be able to live through multiple leases? Instead of carpet, maybe it is a wood floor. Maybe it's a different type of resilient floor. And just overall, what the look of the space is and how you select those materials with that type of mindset. It's almost like you have to create a canvas that is somewhat neutral so that as you have different tenants coming in, they can accessorize it, if you will, to make it look like them, and it's part of their culture, but it's really adaptable and sustainable. Office buildings and office spaces are one of the biggest polluters. The amount of trash that we create is unbelievable. So we have to think about those things and really be in that net zero and just be smart about the solutions of material choices.
Great. I think that's a great way to wrap up. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your insight. I hope you've got some takeaways and benefited from the conversation. Appreciate it.
We're going to go ahead and pass it off to our moderator, Ryan, to kick off our second panel, Designing with Density in Mind. We're going to have a couple more people trickling in, grabbing some coffee, grabbing some food. And then also, before we kick off, I want to mention one last sponsor that we have. We have Thermador that helped us put this event together as well. Forgot to mention them at the beginning of the event. So without Thermador, none of this could be possible as well.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today and for sticking around. We had a great first panel, and thanks to the Bisnow team for making all this possible. We've got a great panel today with some good additional content for a lot of the things that we touched on earlier and some other topics as well. And we're basically framing this around the evolution of the density in the Austin landscape. So let's go ahead and start the program off with Jet to introduce yourself, and we'll work your way towards me.
Hi, I'm Jet Butler. I'm the founder and creative director for FODA, a branding consultancy graphic design studio here in Austin.
I'm Paul Clayton. I'm principal of Clayton Cordy Architects here in Austin. We have an office in San Antonio as well.
Brett Rohde, Rohde Partners, Architects Interiors here in Austin, just up the street actually.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly McEachern with Perkins & Will. I'm an interior designer with a focus on workplace strategies, and it's great to be here today.
Thank you. And I'm Ryan Diaz with Core Office Interiors. I do the marketing strategies with them, so we do tracking trends and getting out here and meeting with all you guys. We provide fixtures, furniture, and technology and AV integration in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio for our commercial, education, healthcare, and government markets. I actually got my start in A&G with Gensler 15 years ago, and if anybody's doing the math on that, yes, I did start in elementary school. I'm actually a longtime attendee, but first-time moderator, so bear with me. Don't yell at me, please. So today we're going to go over Austin's evolving needs with density, placemaking, public space, technology, and the future of Austin and Central Texas as a whole. As Tehran illustrated, Austin has gone from a small college town to a vibrant urban core in just a few years. So Jet, we'll go ahead and start with you and work your way towards me. I want to hear from all of y'all, but thinking on your current and past projects and experience that you've been involved in, how do we accommodate this rapid growth, and how do you focus on the needs of the community and the impact on the surrounding areas?
Boy, you had to pick me first. Well, it's a monstrously large question, and I think and it's fair to say that like what my studio does and what we work on is somewhat adjacent to these issues. In that we work alongside developers, architects, entrepreneurs of different types. And there are a number of ways to solve some of these problems and to address them. They are not unique, nor are they new to Austin. And coming into this speech today, I looked up a fascinating article in the New York Times that was quoting and commenting on the challenges for Austin and its growth. Risks to the aquifer development in the Western Hills that was sort of unregulated and uncontrolled, overcrowding, lack of mass transit, et cetera. The article was written in 1983. So these are issues we've been thinking about and talking about on a national scale about this little town for about 40 years. For us, the interesting part, I guess, is that we sort of touch usually the smallest part of the project or the crown jewel in the project. And what's fascinating to me, and the rest of the panelists will know this better than I do, these enormous developments that might be $140 million or $500 million developments often hinge around very small businesses, very small entrepreneurs, and needs for things that are singular and unique that a community can sort of rally around. So we continue to play in that space, and I think there's value in it for us. And there is some small way of addressing some of those needs in creating small use, small business opportunities within far larger developments. The question I would pose is there enough incentive to do it? The pro formas often don't allow for it.
Yeah, I can actually build on that. Our firm, when asked kind of what we do, my response more often than not is to say that we kind of work in the realm of rich experience. We start by designing the intended experience and then wrap a building around it. We don't do anything that's large like convention center type work, but we do buildings that are, hospitality, couple hundred room hotels, restaurants, spaces like that. And I guess for us, the way that we can have the greatest impact, as Jet said, is to work with Jet or people like Jet to act as proxy and for the users themselves, but also to create more meaning in our spaces. I feel like the more that my firm can produce meaningful space and places, the more people rally around it, as Jet mentioned. And, when it comes to performa and density, oftentimes these projects start with, property line to property line kind of development until you show them how special it can be. And then you can kind of carve away at it and reach a point that serves everyone, because there's intangible value in meaningful space. And it actually, I think, can create more value than more space. So that's kind of my firm's approach, and where we like to play.
Yeah, we focus on larger scale projects, tower projects, mostly multifamily, sometimes hotel, on generally downtown environments like Austin. And, we're spending a lot of our time that we really would like to devote to designing buildings and making these authentic experiences that you touched on, Paul. But quite a bit of our time is really spent finding the pathway through all the regulations and the other challenges that we find in places like Austin. It's really unfortunate because there are ways to create more, in our case, housing, which I think goes to the affordability problem we have. And we have a basic housing problem in Austin. We have a lot of people moving here. A lot of people are already here. We can't keep up with it. There's just no way. We're way behind. So, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to get through the regulations, and also, of course, the cost issues come into play, and try to make more space for design, more space for making better places to live, making more outdoor places to be as part of these projects and to contribute to the streetscape. But it is a frustrating experience to be an architect in Austin, Texas, and see the possibilities, want to do better, want to do better buildings, and get faced with the kind of obstacles we see, on a daily basis.
So I think as the token interior designer on the panel, I'm kind of looking at this from a micro perspective, density within the building, focusing how we're designing space on a very human-centered approach. And I would say the last couple of years, that's been top of everyone's mind is, how much space do I need? Do we need to get less dense as people's social distance a bit more in the workplace? So I also work not just in Austin, but nationally within Perkins and Will Studios. And I would say that the questions are the same everywhere.
Thanks, y'all. So kind of going through the trends that have definitely been part of everything that we've been working on lately. Live, work, play has been one of the fastest growing trends. Specifically, recently, because of work from home, that's kind of adjusted how we've been thinking about space. A&D is creating a sense of placemaking and creating buildings to facilitate this. So what are some projects that you believe placemaking got correct, and why did that work out? And Brett, I'll go ahead and throw that to you with your mixed use and multifamily experience.
Placemaking, I think, our star attraction is kind of where we are right here in downtown Austin. It's a vibrant streetscape. There are people that are living and moving in here, want to live downtown, and there are all these wonderful things to do, places to go within walking distance. So, and it started with back in 20 years ago with Kirk Watson and the putting the city hall where it is and creating the Second Street district. Brilliant, vision that has just exceeded all expectations. If we could do that more, if we had people like Kirk back with us, we could have some leadership that would put these visions out and lead the way to achieve them. But I mean, you know, downtown Austin is really the catalyst for, I think, everything that's happening, from Tesla wanting to move here to Formula One to ACL. Even though these projects aren't in downtown, I think when people think about Austin and wanting to live here, they think, "Wow, that's a beautiful downtown, and it's where I want to live." Or I want to live at some point in the future. Maybe I can't do it right away, but that's my aspiration. So we need to keep building on that success.
And Kelly, from an interiors perspective, what does it look like as far as workplace analysis and creating space for people that's meaningful as we kind of evolve?
Yeah, I think placemaking is especially critical right now as we create environments that bring people back to the office, destination of sorts, engagement, socialization, and we're in this prime opportunity, as the panel discussed earlier. We have this opportunity to really make a difference right now, and we've got to move on it. We've got to take advantage of it and maybe change some things that have needed to change for some time now. It's giving us a new platform and a new opportunity to consider new things.
I think it might be useful to, I'm a junkie for words and what they mean. It might be useful to drill down on the nature of the word placemaking in and of itself. Because I think we all think we live someplace, right? And by definition, we sort of do. But for me, and the way I understood it in studying it in college, I don't practice urbanism, but I studied it in school for my thesis. The notion of placemaking is a very specific term, especially to urbanists and to the Congress for New Urbanism, et cetera. And if you think about, like, just as an informal survey, like, how many people got here on foot this morning to this conference room, walked here? Okay, were you guys staying in the hotel? Okay, you're cheating, that doesn't count. You were close. Okay, so who came here on a bike or a scooter this morning, right? Who came on mass transit to this meeting? Yeah, and who drove alone in a car to this meeting? There we go. So for me, if I was to carve up the term placemaking, which I think is really useful for this conversation, when I think about places, and you can probably do this too, if we imagine the streets of Paris, or you imagine some place in Rome, or some corner of New York that you really love, or a boulevard descending down the hill in San Francisco in some really charming way, the things that we tend to think about tend to have a degree of density to them, right? And they tend to have very crisp, clear urban conditions, right? There's a framework to the way the city feels. Those sort of three things that we studied in school for that: the idea of a node or a point, a path on your way to that node or point in space, and then an area that surrounds it. So when we talk about placemaking, what we probably don't mean, and no offense to anybody that drove in from Round Rock, is a suburb in Round Rock. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. I'm just saying that, like, I don't know how many of us put posters on the wall and thinking about vacationing in a suburb. That's not really what we think about. The American term placemaking, I think, and the panel can disagree with me, tends to track towards the former of those set of examples rather than the latter, that we don't really see those as places. And so if we're going to have a successful place in Austin, the question becomes, do we understand the definition of the term first, number one, and number two, can we then exercise enough political capital to shape the forces that lead to better places? Because I think we're all sort of in the space of being custodians of that vision, but it's hard for us to actually make the change ourselves. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that into the mix because I think it's important to talk about the words themselves.
Thank you. So Paul, one of the things that I was really inspired by was your use of user experience and leading a project from that kind of aspect. So one of the big trends that we're seeing in the A&D is merging interior and exterior space. And Brett kind of reached on this at one point in our conversation earlier, how we're bringing public space up and creating that equity. So what tools are architects using for new and existing buildings to blend the interior and exterior space? And is it truly important to connect the two?
Absolutely in Austin. I think a lot of people move here from Southern California after going to ACL or South by, and the bookends of temperate zones of March and October. So, they come here and the weather's beautiful, and man, let's move to Austin, not knowing that in between it's 105 degrees and buggy. So, it's a kind of a funny phenomenon, because you wouldn't believe the number of people that I talk to about, these products that just completely open up a space to the exterior. And the truth is, in Austin, there's a few months of the year that you can do that without filling your house full of mosquitoes and flies and bugs. So it is, though, very important to our human bodies to understand scale and softness that the landscape can provide. And, just having transparent spaces that can kind of piggyback into views of green spaces in Austin, I think is, it's something that we try to do on every project. From an urban perspective, open space is at direct odds with density. And, our city leaders they've put out some plans for protecting open space, and, I think that everyone agrees that it's important to create even more open space, but I don't think that, maybe we get enough direction there, enough incentive, I should say.
So I'm from Houston, by the way. We get about 1 week where we can be outside. So, Jet, I know that you do a lot of work with tenants and landowners. Is there any increased demand for this kind of blended space?
I would say it's baked into almost everything that we work on. Includes an indoor and outdoor component, and it's usually a function of the pro forma won't work without it. So, yeah, it's a necessity. And ours tends to be more operationally driven, so we're dealing with it in the hospitality sector. So it's a patio, it's a terrace, it's a pool, it's a rooftop bar, so on and so forth. So for us, they're sort of mandated to exist and mandated to be blended by a certain amount of percentage of square footage so that the seat counts work. So.
And then, Brett, on kind of the topic of density, we're seeing now that we're having to provide the kind of park space, green space on rooftops just to be able to fit it all into one city block. How does that work with your projects?
Yeah, most all of our projects will, even our student projects, the first inclination by many of our clients is to try to make a rooftop, Shangri-La with a pool and all of that and great views. And we do that occasionally, but we find sometimes that it's not all that hospitable at those levels, and mostly because of wind. So there are some challenges there in terms of where to put these spaces on the building. Typically, they work a little bit better if they're down a little bit lower to the ground. But on the indoor-outdoor thing, yeah, Paul, we encounter that all the time. With our first inclination is to say, wow, let's just open up some of the common areas to these outdoor spaces. But we run up against, very limited usage, and we run up against something called the energy code, which, again, one of those regulatory barriers that, the idea behind it is obviously great, right? Saving energy by not running the risk of having air conditioning running when you have those doors open. But often to pull that off technically is challenging to be able to kind of get through those code provisions. A lot of times our clients will say, forget it, it's not worth it.
So something that I found interesting last week, I was having a little happy hour at the Gensler Houston offices, which are beautiful, they're new, and we were on the 4th floor outdoor terrace. And Stephanie Burrett, one of the principals there, mentioned to me that apparently mosquitoes can't make it higher than 25 feet off the ground. So that was an interesting kind of planning development that I had never really thought of, but it was nice and
I'm
humid.
buying
but-
stilts.
Yeah.
I'm buying stilts the minute this is over. 21-foot tall stilts.
There you go. So we briefly touched on this, but we definitely have a new group of people in Austin coming in as the tech industry is making its way towards Central Texas. So how are architects and designers implementing technology into buildings? And are we creating smart buildings? Are we using dumb technology? What's working, what's not? And I know Kelly and Jet had some interesting things to say about this, but if anybody wants to pipe in.
Oh, well, in the run-up to this, we were talking about smart technology, and I made the somewhat glib, but I think appropriate joke that we're still combating a lot of dumb technology. So for all of our efforts as design teams to build componentry and technology and equipment into projects that allows buildings to be more efficient, spaces to be more serviceable, more hygienic, cleaner, on and on and on, you still run into strange, dumb technology holdups. And a great example of that, and since I planted the seed earlier, would be a car. So for all our effort to build a building that is very green and very sustainable, it doesn't really help if everybody had to get to that building in a car and I had to build a requisite amount of space to house all of the cars opposite the building that for the people. And I was thinking about this as an area thing. I don't know if you guys ever thought about this. This came to this morning with coffee, that the average car is going to occupy what, about 200 square feet, right? Plus or minus. And when it's in motion, it occupies more than that, right? Because you can't drive bumper to bumper. I mean, you wouldn't know that from most Texans, but you can't. So you think about the amount of space that cars occupy in motion and they occupy when sitting still versus the amount of space a human being occupies. And that brings me back to that earlier notation about, like, how did we get here? So, regardless of what brilliant notions I might propose to a client about how a restaurant space might be smarter, I may be robbing Peter to pay Paul. It may just be that, well, no offense. I need a different metaphor when I do a panel with you, brother. It may be that, like, the net is not zero to steal from the prior panel. If you look at it only in the context of the building and we miss the rest of it, there's a problem. And so that, to me, the smartest technology comes back to placemaking and proximities. Cities that we can walk, ride a bike, or use transit to get to the places we live and work are inherently smarter cities. No amount of clever thermostats or solar power on the roof or computerized systems you can control with your phone offsets that factor. I think that's a valid statement. So.
Yeah, and Kelly and I were talking last night about some of our past experience in workplace analysis and kind of what our company is doing right now to provide utilization rates and density tracking on the interior side. So I wanted to hear a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, and not only on utilization, but also as we talk about the recent topics of healthy buildings, a lot of those trackers, sensors, smart building components are able to monitor what the air quality is in a room. So not only are we seeing how much is it being used, maybe we're starting to see why it's not being used, and we can tie all of that together and make the space, more efficient and more usable for its end users. I think, the other thing, of course, everyone's talking about reducing some real estate costs. People aren't coming into the office as much. Are we implementing a seat sharing model? And technology is very helpful for reserving those seats. Again, utilization studies. Do we have the right number of seats? Do we need to change that even more so?
Thank you. And so finally, the question that Brett has been eager to address. Obviously, with density, there's only so much that you can do when there needs to be some large-scale infrastructure and code changes at the state and local level. So what do you see that developers kind of need to work with the city and state and local governments to combat some of those issues?
Yeah, I kind of touched on that earlier. It's my pet peeve. Remember, I'm trying to find more time to design and less time to, negotiate code provisions. But yeah, I mean, the city needs to get ahead of it. It's just the way it's been going for quite some time is it's a protective, it's a kind of defensive mode. Part of it has to do with the way our council's elected. It's elected by essentially neighborhood groups that are obviously concerned about encroachment, well-founded concern. But the focus needs to turn around and talk about what we can do, what we want, what we want the city to be. We want to get ahead of it and lead it as opposed to fighting, and then giving up at the last minute and walking away, starting up the next fight. Again, I don't know that, I don't know that anyone really would argue that downtown Austin, the downtown core, is a good place for density. And I would think, okay, well, let's find that common ground and think about the possibilities as opposed to, work on preventing all projects from going forward. Leadership, obviously, takes a lot of vision and a lot of leadership, and some political capital needs to, probably be put on the table to bring us all together to make these changes we need to make to be able to go forward and build a great city.
And Jet, you brought up a really important question. I thought that, is there a plan for Austin? What does it look like? Then I want to hear from each of you guys. If you had the reins, like, what would your plan for Austin be for the future of its landscape?
Well, I mean, I know the city produced the Vision plan and released it about 2011, 2012, is that right? They put out a 5-year report card on it, I think in 2017 or 2018. And I think the city was looking at about 41 different indicators to say if we were on sort of the right path. And, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but of those 41, I think it's like 12 to 14 are on the right path, 12 to 14 no change, 12 to 14 go in the wrong direction, 7 not enough data, that sort of a thing. So like the need and the focus, the importance of having enough interest from the populace, but also enough understanding about these things to know it. I mean, I haven't read the whole report. I've read the executive summary. I don't know if anyone in the room has read that entire thing. It's really long. It's like 300 pages. So as a branding agent, as someone who works on communication, I would say the first challenge the city has is they need to make their intentions for Austin's growth and planning clear and easy to understand. Like number one, it's got to be very easy to bullet point so that the average citizen can get it. Number two, it needs to be talked about in ways that are actionable. There's a lot of pie in the sky language about what we could do, and some of those things have been brilliant. The Wire, did anyone see The Wire that the gents from Frog proposed a couple years back? It was a urban gondola system that would run from the airport to downtown. It always gets a smirk because you say urban gondola and people kind of giggle and they think about a ski slope. It sounded brilliant. A lot of the math actually worked. A lot of their propositions actually made sense. It was pretty brilliant stuff. But I think you come back to, no matter what, the same issue each time, which is there are a handful of known and proven principles. Peter Calthorpe, one of the founders of the Congress for New Urbanism, talks about this, and it's the same 3 things I mentioned earlier, like walking, bikes, and transit. There's no way around it. Single car drivers are the crux of the issue. No amount of building great buildings offsets the problem with the car. His firm has been doing some really interesting work the last probably 15 or 20 years in China and in California to change the arc there. The Chinese have had really great success with it in enacting some of their plans and propositions. And I think the key thing there is you come down to one of 2 different ways that this gets solved. Either A, enormous push and initiative from the communities that live in the city that want to see a healthy city have to be involved and engaged. I think it's a bipartisan issue, thank God. I don't know if you could get on the wrong side of this and stripe it, and there's so very few things that are bipartisan anymore, but this is one of them. We all want a great city. We could all agree on that. And then some real facts about just basic modes of transportation. The architects and interior designers on this panel are far smarter than me about how to build great buildings, and they can do it if the city gives them a place and a way to do it, and that just requires enormous political capital as well. And incentive for the developers. That'll be the last thing I would comment on. We've worked with a lot of developers over the years, and one thing I can say for sure is that if you're doing a project, say in Houston, that's a $500 million development, that's one that we worked on. That's an enormous amount of money to move. There's a lot of investors and stakeholders, and the interest of the people putting the money in, rightfully so, is do I get my money back, right? Fair enough. After that, they'll kind of let you do whatever you want to do, I think. There still has to be a voice in the room in those sort of, those ivory towers and those halls of power when that conversation being had about here's how we're going to use the site. It's all beholden to a pro forma. There's nobody in the room to say what would best benefit the community. And so we're reliant upon a benevolent benefactor at that point, somewhere within the developer's team that says, oh, you know what would be really great is if we didn't put that space over there up for commercial lease and we made it whatever. And then someone goes, that's going to lose money. And they go, yeah, but it makes a better community. Like that conversation has to be had in those rooms and in those halls of power. If it's not, the only other tool we have is sort of civic momentum, which requires, again, a real clear understanding of the problems and a real clear understanding of the strategies. And right now, I think that's pretty hard to get.
Paul, if you had a plan for Austin, what would it look like?
My money's on Elon Musk. He can build some tunnels, right?
Right.
I mean,
yes. The Boring Company, best name ever.
Isn't that the tax for moving to Austin?
Yeah. Yeah. A tunnel would solve some things.
Yeah, it's a complex issue that doesn't have a straightforward answer, and I agree with Jet that a heavy dose of education really should happen. That as a community, we should have someone at the city maybe holding more workshops or producing some articles in the paper. Just raising these issues in a more of an educational kind of way, because I agree. I don't think that any of us are at odds about wanting a great city. And until that happens, until we can kind of all lock arms and move towards the goal, I'm not sure we're ever going to solve it. It's too contentious.
Yeah.
Well, we could add something to that too. I just thought of it. 2 examples about like where it goes wrong and where it goes right. Like where it goes wrong is San Francisco. Plenty of information out there to talk about that. Beautiful city, but a lot of their challenges come from an unwillingness to grow, and they've created the problem that they now have to solve. And on the opposite side of it, Berlin, of all things, after World War II, the German government bulldozed more of the city than the Allies bombed, which is significant because a lot of the city was bombed flat. And it's argued that one sort of central planner, key guy that drove the urban development in Berlin is responsible for the reason the city works again and is healthy and beautiful and efficient and effective. And a lot of his rules for that were just simple urbanism and edge conditions. I mean, he even forced Frank Gehry into a box for one of his projects there. So like that's that kind of some singular entity can make change if they've got enough capital to do it.
Only they can solve the traffic issue. Brett, Kelly, do y'all have any final thoughts on kind of the future of Austin and what needs to happen?
I talked about downtown quite a bit, but I think a lot of people feel that we need to have more density in some of the other areas like transit districts and places like South Lamar. And again, these are these little battlegrounds that pop up. There are places just north of downtown. We're working on a really beautiful project with a couple of folks here called the Linden, and it's 17th Street in Guadalupe. It's a 30-story residential building. There are plenty of other sites in that area for just the same thing or even taller. But there are forces related to, yes, some residents in smaller, older homes that have been there, obviously since the 20s, bungalows for the most part. And then there are some historic homes that are beautiful and have been there even longer. Not very many. There's a lot of other land in that area that I think the hard decision needs to be made about how much we're willing, or how much we need to preserve, and how much new growth we're willing to forego. But when we go into that neighborhood, it's a very strong, it's a very big battle with a big a bigger group of people who are just trying to fend off any kind of growth at all. And so, again, it kind of goes back to the city leadership to get in front of it and say, look, okay, we love these beautiful historic homes. We want to save them. We have some people living there. We need to decide how to take care of them as well. But look, this is a bigger decision. We've got to look at our city and make some tough decisions about where we can build and where it's appropriate. So I lived in that neighborhood when I was in college, so, it served a great purpose for me, but there's a time and place, for everything. So we need to move on.
Yeah, well, Houston's addressing that by bulldozing it and putting up 1,000 townhomes. So I'm glad you guys are thinking of it a little differently. Kelly, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just thinking about, again, what has happened in the last 2 years and the impact to density of downtown, and really thinking about how we can have that resilient city that is prepared to respond to the next disaster, unexpected change. And I think a lot of the things we've talked about today really, speak to that, like the outdoor space and highly adaptive types of spaces that can be flexible and used for a variety of purposes. So I think just kind of taking the idea of resiliency that we typically think of as a response to natural disasters and making sure that we are prepared for future whatevers.
So many unknowns. The word unprecedented has been used way too many times this year. Huey, do you have any questions for us?
I do. David? There we go. I have a couple questions. It says, let me go to the first one, if I can find it. It says 2 questions. Does current FAR restrictions or rising building costs hinder your design from initial dreams to final delivery more than the other? Or do building codes constrain more?
I can talk about that, yeah. No, the FAR, floor area ratio, that's sort of it's a zoning term that really determines how much can be built on a particular site. Density really is directly related to density. The city's, over the years, has just tried to hold that down. It's been inching up. It's 8 FAR in a lot of areas of the downtown. Some areas have been upzoned to as much as 25. There's a lot of discussion about why we have it at all in a place like downtown Austin. Really, it's just an artificial cap. What's it doing? The city is reluctant to remove that cap. But it's related to cost too, because, and it's related to architecture and design, because if we have a restrained FAR on a site, there's always pressure to maximize every bit of that FAR on a given site. If we had some headroom, I think we would have a little bit of opportunity to do some better design and provide better amenities, just in general, a better place to work or live. So again, regulation, holding it back, where it's probably counterproductive.
But land cost ultimately driving it up. I mean, for these developers to make their financial model work, right?
I think so, but at some point, what we've seen where there aren't FAR caps, the land cost, they're not going to go, so high that because there's sort of an infinite amount of space you could build depending on, how tall you wanted to build. The land costs level off, and where we've been in situations where we haven't had an FAR cap, we've found that our clients we don't talk about it that much. It's like, okay, we don't have that issue to deal with. We're not restrained. So we can work with the building and work with the pro forma and the budget and determine what's really best for that particular site. When we have these caps, we're always pushing up against them, and we're making compromises all over the place to try to stay under. So.
How are architects and designers solving for unknown density in the workplace?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. At Perkins & Will, we've actually developed a proprietary tool that is looking at possible scenarios and space planning initiatives to really reevaluate how space can be allocated differently within the work environment, just based on the different user types that we're dealing with now. So, the last panel talked quite a bit in detail about trends and piloting and various approaches, which are all great. We are dialing in with our end user data and surveying, and created persona types, understanding how users are using space differently. That's including remote workers, hybrid working, in-office working, but not just that, and not just based on preferences, but really, what's the complexity of the job? What's the product that's being developed? How are these teams working together? And how do we start to plan space right-sized to fit these teams and how much they will be in the office? Lots of question marks about what that looks like, but this data analysis tool has really been helpful in providing different square footages per each of those persona types, as well as seat sharing ratios that helps us understand how we can respond, be adaptable, and utilize space in the most, not just efficient way, but the most dynamic and engaging way, providing people with choice, autonomy, and the right place suited for the right task.
Perfect, thank you. And then one last final question. What are the panelists' thoughts on Austin Connect and its ability to improve transit within the city?
It's not enough. I mean, the train lines are, I think it's already, we can make these plans, but they're already out of date before they even build them. So it's, I just wish that we could maybe, as a community, demand a more innovative approach.
What's the solution to that? If it's out of date by the time it's constructed, like how do you go about that?
Well, again, given the type of city that Austin's trying to be, I mean, is a subway system really out of the question? I mean, could we create something that, is much more accessible to people? I think that some of the issues with the trains is just the fact that you have to get in your car and drive there. It's not truly walkable. And we're talking about creating a dense city to the point that you don't have to have a car. I mean, wouldn't that be great? Everyone in the room raised their hand, they drove here, but wouldn't it have been great to have walked to a subway and gotten here on foot?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you to some extent, but I am really amazed at some of the aspects of the plan that have to do with some underground, like in the downtown area. They're talking about underground stops, which is totally amazing. I lived in New York City for a long time, and I used to marvel at all these subway stops. They're all, at least in Manhattan, they're all below grade. They're all, you just have to go down and get on the subway. Well, I would have never imagined anybody would propose that for Austin, Texas, but I do, got to hand it to them for, taking that on. At least to a certain, I mean, it's probably a small part of the whole project, but they're talking about tunneling under Lady Bird Lake as well. So very interesting. Hope they can do it. Hope they pull it off. Maybe they need Elon to help them, right, to get that done. But
And actually, Austin Transit Partnership is a client of ours. We're working on their office space, specifically the team who's designing Project Connect. So I'm out of my wheelhouse a little bit here talking about mass transit, but I'm really excited to see that their plan does go beyond the 2 new rail lines, but actually how they are connecting walkable trails, biking trails, bus, and all of this into a system that's easily utilized together in conjunction as someone has an experience moving through the city.
Well, perfect. Huge round of applause for our final panel here.